actions speak louder than words. The thoughts of our hearts and minds in the 3 a.m. worries and contemplations are an indictment of what we actually think and believe. As we move on to the 4th letter in our acronym in our series Walk and discuss no, I believe that God will reveal just what we need for today. So we've talked about wait, ask, listen, and now know, K-N-O-W. And we're going to look at several verses today, and I pray God just really opens this up to you. So we're going to start in Psalms 46 and verse 10. And Psalms 46:10. This is a passage that was really, David, when he wrote this, was really talking about, God being a refuge at a time of trouble. And when things were going on, in fact, the very first part of it says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. So that's what he's talking about. And so as we come down here to 46:10, it says, be still, and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. And so that's where we're going to start. Be still and know that I am God. And again, I said, the context of this is that there's, a refuge in the time of trouble. And the verse just prior to this, he makes wars to cease, and he breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariot in the fire. So he's talking about troublesome times in many different ways. All right. And then it comes up with this, be still and know that I'm God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. So our first part, be still and know that, first be still. And the idea of be still is quite an important piece to this. And this be still in context here can be taken to be like loosen, loosen up or relax, if you will. Don't worry about. And again, in context, he's talking about all these troublesome times and all these troublesome things. And it says, that when it talks about he will, break the bow and do all those things. He's talking about, detente or loosening the bowstring. He's talking about coming to a place where the battle is ceasing. So this idea of loosen ties in there. Be still, loosen. Don't hang on so tight to this. Don't be so wound up about it, but loosen. And it's also the idea of cease. Cease the hostility, cease the stressing, cease the worry, cease all these things that are going on, all this troublesome stuff. Cease that. Be still and know. Be still, cease that and know. That's what we're talking about. And then the other usage of this be still can be to cure. The remedy, the cure. So in troublesome times, the cure, and we're talking about God, right? We're talking about God. This is David, a man after God's own heart, the guy who wrote, one of my favorite passages in the Bible, the 23rd Psalm. And he's saying, all this stuff going on, let the cure happen and know that it's going to be okay, right? So be still. That's what he's telling him. Be still. Relax. Take it easy. Quit worrying. Quit stressing. And then it says no. Be still and know. There's times when you just know something. You know it inside. And that's what he's really talking about. Be still and know that I am God. Don't think that I am God or believe that I am God or wonder if I am God, but know that I am God. And be still and know that I am God. And in the midst of your troubles, loosen up and know that I am God. And he goes on and it says, I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. And so I want you to look at this here. He says, be still, loosen up, lighten up, relax, and know that I am God. In other words, know that I'm going to be exalted among the nations. Know that I'll be exalted in the earth. Why? Because I'm God. And I'm able to relax. Why? Because you're God. That's really the answer to this whole thing. Know that he is God. And we're going to talk about that as we work through this lesson today. We're going to talk about it for the next couple lessons. And I just want to take and do a little commercial here in this for the fact that we are going to be returning to live Sunday school sometime in the next few weeks. And so stay tuned as we announce that and nail down the exact date. For those of you watching online, what that means is that I actually get to have people in the room with me, and I'm not just talking to a camera, which I'm excited about, to be honest with you. It also means that the backdrop is probably going to change, to the fellowship hall where we do the Sunday school. I don't know if we'll do the backdrops like we've been doing the last little bit or not. We have to figure that out. And there'll be interaction from within the room as people ask questions or whatever. It's how we normally do things. But I want you to just know that that's coming and stay tuned for when that happens. And our times that these will be going on will be the same. It'll still be 10:30. And, you know, with it being live, it's going to, potentially we'll have some other noises and things that are going on with that. But I believe it'll be worthwhile to do. And then we'll see where we're at when we get a little farther down the road with that. So just be aware of that. So here in the series Walk, know, be still and know that I am God. Now in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 12, it says, and I'm actually going to read 11 through 13, so let me just be really clear. 11 through 13. It says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Verse 12. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I am also known. Verse 13. And now abide faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. And so I want to look at that for a moment, and I want to look at the growing up. We're talking about walking with God, and that's part of growing up. As we walk with God, there's a correlation between walking and growing. We walk with God, we grow in God, and so growing up, and I want you to think about that in context here. Verse I'm really focusing on at the moment is, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. In other words, not everything has been revealed to us just yet. And when it is revealed to us, we'll see better, right? It'll be clearer what's going on. So as we're growing up, there's some of that that's going to happen. We're going to see things from a different perspective. We're going to have new light, new revelation, new understanding. And so to put it completely in its context here, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, and I understood as a child, I thought as a child. That's the reality of our existence. And when I was first saved, I might have understood differently, I might have thought differently, I might have spoken differently. But as I grow in God, as I walk with God, as I get closer to God, that's what we're talking about. It says, but when I became a man, when I grew up a little bit, I put away childish things. I put away thinking as a child and acting as a child and the perspective of the child, and I began to understand things. And, that should be really easy for us when we look at, life. I mean, you start out as a kid, you play, and you don't have a lot of worries and things you have to take care of. And then as you grow up, you have more challenging school responsibilities, and then maybe you start a part-time job, and then you get a full-time job, and you graduate from school, whether you go to college or not. But you graduate from at some point, and you're off and running in life, and you get married, and you have kids of your own, and all these different things go on. That's a growing up process, and you change in how you think and how you look at things and how you act. And if you don't, it doesn't go very well for you. So when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now, currently, we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face, intimately with God. We see God in a different light. We have a different relationship. We know God in a different way. And it says, now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I am also known. And so there's this growing up in God. And it's really understanding what we see. It's, when I look in the mirror dimly, I may not get the detail. I may not see everything. But when I'm looking face to face, then I can see, then I can understand, then I can have a different grasp of what's going on. And that's part of the process. And I don't want to get, so people are saying, well, it's too deep, or you're not making it real to me. I understand. We're talking about growing up in God. We're talking about walking with God. And when we get to that place where we put away the childish things and we know God, we know God, we desire a relationship with God. And verse 13 says, and now abide faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. And, your King James may say that, faith, love, and charity, but the greatest of these is charity. And here's the thing. Charity, or love here, is really talking about a grace, which means it's really talking about a salvation. We are saved by grace. It's the idea of a benevolence that goes on. The greatest of these is that benevolent grace, the charity of love. And we know love, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So these are almost, completely interchangeable here. Charity, grace, and love. And they all point right at salvation. And so now abide faith, hope, and charity, these three, but the greatest of these is, can I say it this way? Greatest of these is salvation. So now abides faith, hope, and salvation, these three, but the greatest of these is salvation. And so it's not that the word love being used there is incorrect at all, but I want you to understand that it all comes down to the grace that God provided for us in giving us salvation that makes it work. And as I understand that, I move closer to that place where I can see God face to face. I grow up a little bit more in God, and I can begin to think and act and speak as a man instead of as a child. Growing up in God. Let's go back to what we first talked about. Be still and know. Relax a little bit and know that I'm God. And the world is going to exalt God. And then grow up a little bit and understand, because when you grow up, you're going to think a little bit differently. You're going to see things a little bit differently. You're going to recognize the value of your salvation. This is what is being talked about, and this is what I believe God wants us to understand in the know aspect of our walk, is that we can wait, be twined together with him. That's good. We can ask. That's good. We can listen. That's good. And then those actions and that process as we grow up in God is we have to reach that place where we know. Where we know what we know, what we know, what we know. We know God. And that comes from walking and growing up. Our perspectives change. So nobody's telling you, it's going to be an instantaneous light year transportation thing from where you are to knowing. But understand that the commitment in your own heart and mind to know God is critical. Now, I want to also go to 2 Timothy 1, verse 12. And when we get there, it says, and this is Timothy talking about, he's not ashamed of the gospel and the, different teachings and stuff. And it says, for this reason, he's talking about Christ that died for us, the salvation aspect of things. He says, for this reason, I also suffer these things. Nevertheless, I am not ashamed. For I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep what I have committed to him until that day. And what is Timothy saying? Well, first of all, he says, all the stuff that's gone on, but in spite of all that, I'm not ashamed. We're in big trouble when we're ashamed of the things that we know we need to do or want to do or supposed to do, because the reality is shame, that comes with sin, by the way. Shame will cause you to not do what you're supposed to do. Shame will cause you to procrastinate, obfuscate, and do anything you can because you don't want to do that. There's a shame aspect. And he's saying, look, Christ died for you, and I'm not ashamed to say that at all. So the world might say, oh, that's, hocus pocus or whatever, but he's saying, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. And then he goes on and he says, for I know whom I have believed. I know whom I have believed. I know whom I have believed. And that's part of this growing up in the walk. I know whom I have believed. I know it. I know whom I have believed. And then he says, and am persuaded. When we get new facts, when we get information that we haven't seen before, it's persuasive in our opinion, unless we're just stubborn to the point we can't learn. When you see something and you recognize how important it is or how powerful it is or how right it is, you can be persuaded in your thinking. You can come to a different level in your thinking. And that's what he's really talking about, kind of come to that different level. So back to when I was a child and now I've put away childish things as a man. He says, I am persuaded, okay, that he is able to keep what I have committed. I'm persuaded that he is able to keep what I have committed. Let's go all the way back. Be still. Why? Because in trouble sometimes you can relax, you can put it, he's got the cure. We can put it in his hands. And I can put it in his hands. That's what I've committed. That's what I've given. That's what I've placed in his hands. That's my commitment. So I have believed and am persuaded that he's able to keep what I have given him, what I've placed in his hands until that day. Right? I can put it in his hands and I can leave it there knowing that he's got it. I can relax. That's part of putting away the childish things where I have to run, go check every 2 seconds what I gave him is still there, and I can actually trust it to God. I can give it to God and just know that he's got it. Why? Because he's God. Committed, persuaded, committed, right? I'm persuaded, and now I make the commitment. Are you committed? Have you put it in his hands and you're going to leave it there? Not go pick it back up again? Have you been persuaded along those lines? Are you able to be still get out of the conflict zone and get into the trusting God zone, knowing that he's going to be exalted, knowing that he's going to come out on top? Do you know that and you're knower? Or are you still waffling around a little bit? Now, I want to go one more verse here. I want to go to Mark chapter 4 and verse 39. And this is, again, something you're very familiar with, and we've talked about it before, maybe from a little different perspective today. But here's Jesus in the boat with the disciples. And the waves are out of control. Storm is tossing him around like crazy, and he's asleep. And they go and wake him up, don't you care that we're perishing? And then verse 39 says, Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Now, we know that, if we go on reading, he says to them, Why are you so fearful? And how do you have no faith? And they had feared exceedingly. And then they say, Who can this be that even the wind and the sea obey him? Who is this guy? Let me tell you something. They had been with him for some time. And if you look, Jesus asked them questions on several occasions. Who do men say that I am? Who do you say that I am? Why? Well, who knew? He wanted to know if they knew him or not. He wanted to know if they really believed him or not. And I said when I started here, the thoughts of our hearts and minds and the 3 a.m. worries and contemplations are an indictment of what we actually think and believe. Here they are, they're the disciples. They are in the boat with him, and all of a sudden they're fearful, and if in fact he's the Son of God and all the things that they've said, the miracles they've seen. Now in the middle of the crisis, they're like, who is this guy? Because they didn't know him. They knew about him. They hadn't reached that place where they knew him, where they know God. And you may be in that same place where you have a relationship that's on one level, but you're still dealing with the childish things. You haven't got to the full grown-up part where your eyes are really opened up and you understand and know who God is. So who knew? He stopped the seas from tossing them around. And so I want you to stop and think about that for a moment. Verse 39, I'm going to read it again. Then, in the midst of all this, don't you even care we're going to perish? Then, seas rough, the boat's being tossed around. He was relaxed before. He was in the be still part because he knew who he was. But they weren't relaxed. They were all stressed out. All the stress going on. And then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea. Now, rebuked, that's telling it, the wind to get died down, right? And said to the sea, so he's speaking to the sea and he's speaking to the wind, and he says, peace be still. Peace be still. And it says, and the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Now, we know he was the Prince of Peace, or is the Prince of Peace. But I want you to understand something. When I say who knew, let me tell you, the wind knew who was speaking. They didn't have to talk about whether they had enough faith or had grown up enough or anything else. But he spoke to the wind, he rebuked it, and it ceased. Why? Because the wind knew who was talking. And the seas became calm. Why? Because it says he said to the sea, peace be still. And so it was stilled. Why? Because the sea knew who was talking. We sometimes don't recognize who's talking. We don't recognize who we're talking to. We don't recognize who we're walking with, and we don't recognize who's talking. Jesus Christ spoke to the wind and the sea and said, "Be still," because they already knew he was God. And what the Psalms tells us is, be still and know that he is God. The disciples didn't know. Who is this man? Even the wind and the sea obey him. Who needs this? Who needs to understand this today in their Christian walk? Who needs to understand the importance of know? Well, I'll tell you who. The person that has yet to fully understand who God is needs to know that he's going to be exalted by the nations. He's going to be exalted by the earth. Why? Because the winds, the sea, the earth, the sun, the stars, they know who God is. Even the enemy knows who God is. And even the demons know who God is. And you can say, well, I believe in God. That's great. Now you need to have a relationship where you know God. And so who needs this? I don't know. Do you have any storms in your life? Because if you got storms in your life, you need this. If you're struggling to have peace in the situations that you find yourself in, you need this. Why? Because you need to be still and know who God is. You need to be still and know that he is God. You need to be still and let him be God in your life. You need to be still and not stressing out and not having a meltdown. And you need to recognize that you're depending on God, that's who he is. Even the winds and the seas obey him. And he's not asleep at the switch. He does care about whether you perish. The thing was, he wasn't worried about the storm. Why? Because he knew who he was, and he knew that the seas and the winds knew who he was. And this lesson allows, in this little lesson in the Bible here, allows for the beginning of the disciples to really begin to understand who he is. You got problems in your life? You got storms in your life? Know God. The God that loved you so much that he died for you. Don't let the enemy keep you stirred up and in trouble sometimes. We live on a planet that runs in cycles, and there's good days and bad days and stuff that happens. It's good and bad. And sometimes it's your perspective on either one of those things. But the bottom line is there's bad people. There's bad situations from your perspective. Bottom line, be still and know that he's God. Know that he's got it. Know that all of your problems are subject to his authority. And when you go to God, don't go to God, with the idea that, well, if I bargain right, maybe he'll listen to me or whatever. Go to God knowing that he loves you. He died for you. He defeated death for you. Go to God knowing that he loves you, knowing that he's the Almighty, knowing that he's the Prince of Peace, knowing that he has the wisdom you need, knowing that he has the comfort you need, knowing that he has the power that you need. Go to him knowing all those things, and then take your problems, and instead of trying to figure out the solutions for yourself, give them to God. Let him speak the solutions back to you. And you may say, well, I don't understand how that works, or I don't hear God talk to me or whatever. Begin to seek God. In other words, try and know more about God. Pray to God. Ask him to reveal himself to you. And guess what? That'll all start to happen. And you'll know God. You'll grow up in God. And you can put away the childish things and begin to walk with God. Now, my summaries on these lessons always say, wait, there's more, because there is. we're going to continue to talk about know and how that all works in the light of our series, Walk. And we'll be doing that over the next couple of weeks. When we're done with this series, then we're going to return to live Sunday school. We're going to return to live Sunday school for a period of about 6 weeks to see what kind of attendance we get for that and how that's received and how we can make everything work. And that also means we'll probably have some substitutes in speaking. It's been almost 2 years since I haven't recorded one of these Sunday school lessons. And normally, you know, there's a few times a year when other people step in and fill in for me for a week or so. And so we'll have some of that go on in that 6 weeks, and we'll just kind of see how it all looks and how it all fits and how it all works. And I'm excited for that. I'm excited again to be able to have people in the room that I can get their comments and their questions and open up a little bit more of a discussion type format. And hopefully that means we can all grow together as we walk with God. And so I want you to just think about whatever situation you've got going on, whatever troubles you're dealing with, whatever storms in your life, be still and know that He is God. And that's it for this week.